Section 8. Multi-step process, undoing deed fraud, and course. Wrap-up. Protecting Arizona from deed fraud. When prevention fails, what happens next? Up to this point, you've learned how to recognize and prevent deed fraud, but what happens when it still occurs? This final section brings everything together by walking through the real-world process of undoing deed fraud in Arizona. Because while prevention is the goal, response is the reality when fraud slips through. This is where the stakes become highest. Once a fraudulent deed is recorded, ownership has been altered on paper, and reversing that process requires time, legal action, and coordination across multiple parties. Step 1. Immediate legal action. The first and most critical step is contacting an experienced real estate attorney. This is not a situation that can be handled casually or informally. A qualified attorney will evaluate the situation, determine the extent of the fraud, and guide the property owner through the legal process required to restore ownership. The attorney will often recommend filing a legal action, gathering evidence, and coordinating with agencies to begin correcting the fraudulent transfer. Key insight: the faster legal action is taken, the greater the chance of limiting damage. Step 2. Notify authorities and regulatory agencies. Fraud must be reported immediately to the appropriate authorities. This includes filing a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate and contacting the Arizona Attorney General's office. These agencies can investigate the fraud, provide support, and in some cases initiate criminal proceedings against those responsible. They also play a role in preventing additional fraudulent activity connected to the same individuals or properties. This step connects directly back to your role as a professional, reporting matters. Step 3. Filing a quiet title. Action. The most important legal tool in undoing deed fraud is the quiet title action. This is a lawsuit filed in court to determine the rightful owner of the property and remove any fraudulent claims from the title. During this process, the homeowner must present evidence such as original deeds, proof of ownership, and documentation of the fraud. The court will review the evidence, hear arguments, and ultimately issue a decision. If successful, the court will declare the fraudulent deed invalid and restore ownership to the rightful party. This is the legal reset button, but it takes time and proof. Step 4. Working with the county recorder. Once fraud is identified, the county recorder must be notified. The fraudulent deed can be flagged in public records, indicating that it is under dispute. This serves as a warning to anyone reviewing the property's history and helps prevent further transactions based on the fraudulent transfer. After a court ruling, the official court order must be recorded to correct the public record and remove the fraudulent deed. This step closes the loop in the recording process you learned earlier. Step 5. Law enforcement involvement. Deed fraud is not just a civil issue, it is a criminal act. Reporting the fraud to local law enforcement allows for investigation, evidence gathering, and potential prosecution of those involved. Law enforcement may work alongside state and federal agencies, especially in cases involving organized criminal syndicates. This reinforces a key point: fraud has consequences beyond the transaction. Step 6. Evidence collection and documentation. Strong documentation is essential to winning a fraud case. This includes original purchase documents, prior deeds, communication records, and any evidence that demonstrates ownership and fraudulent activity. Witness statements and supporting documentation can also strengthen the case, helping establish the timeline and nature of the fraud. In fraud cases, documentation is power. Step 7. Court decision and record correction. The court ultimately determines ownership and issues a ruling. If the homeowner proves their case, the judge will invalidate the fraudulent deed and confirm the rightful owner. The certified court order is then recorded with the county recorder's office, officially correcting the public record and restoring ownership. This is the final step in undoing fraud, but it is often the longest and most complex. Step 8. Ongoing communication and resolution. Throughout the process, communication is critical. Property owners must stay in contact with their attorney, regulatory agencies, and law enforcement to ensure that every step is completed correctly. Following legal guidance, responding to requests for information, and maintaining documentation all contribute to a successful resolution. Fraud is not undone in one step. It is resolved through a coordinated process. The role of ADRE, protecting the public. The Arizona Department of Real Estate plays a critical role in both prevention and response. ADRE investigates complaints, verifies document authenticity, and works with law enforcement and other agencies to address fraudulent activity. They also provide education and outreach, helping professionals and property owners recognize fraud risks before they occur. Recent efforts have shown measurable impact, with millions of dollars in homeowner equity protected through investigation and prevention efforts. This reinforces the importance of collaboration across the industry. Bringing it all together, the full picture. Let's step back and look at what you've learned. You started with the reality of deed fraud and its impact on real people. You learned how deeds work, how they are recorded, and how criminals exploit those processes. You explored the roles of syndicates, insiders, and professionals, and you learned how to identify red flags and implement preventive measures. Now, you understand what happens when fraud occurs and how it is undone. This is the full life cycle of deed fraud. Your role moving forward. As a real estate professional, you are not just part of the process, you are part of the protection. Every transaction you handle is an opportunity to prevent fraud, protect your clients, and uphold the integrity of the real estate industry. The difference between a successful fraud and a stopped transaction is often one professional who takes the time to verify, question, and act. That professional is you. Online discussion. Question 1. Why is a quiet title action necessary in deed fraud cases? Answer. Because it allows the court to legally determine ownership and remove fraudulent claims from the title. Question 2. Why is early reporting critical when fraud is discovered? Answer. Because it allows authorities to investigate quickly and prevents further fraudulent transactions or financial damage. Question 3. What is the most important factor in successfully undoing deed fraud? Answer. Strong documentation and evidence that proves rightful ownership and demonstrates the fraudulent activity.